Hello and welcome to the webinar, Cybersafety in Ed. You've got this. My name is Damon Dwyer. I'm the Marketing Manager for Ox IT Solutions and your moderator for today's session. We have some exciting things to share with you today, but first I wanted to cover a bit of general housekeeping. Firstly, I wanted to assure you that you will receive a full recording of this session after the event, so don't worry about accessing any of the content covered here today. Secondly, if I could ask if you have any questions during this session, please could you just pop them into the Q&A using the Q&A icon at the top of the page, and then we will answer any questions at the end of the speaker sessions. And finally, by a means of introduction, we have two speakers today who will be talking, amongst other things, on how cybersecurity underpins and protects the education learning environment. And with that, I'm delighted to introduce our first guest speaker, David Fuller. David was previously the network manager for the Mill Academy, changing roles in July 2024 to Director of Operations, looking after the IT, estate, admin and health and safety teams. Prior to transitioning into IT, David worked as a teaching assistant for many years. And with that introduction done, I'm going to kick off the session by asking you, David, if you can give us a bit of an overview about the Mill Academy in Witney, just to set the scene for everyone a little.
Okie doke, yeah. So Mill Academy, we're based in Witney, as Damon said. So we're on the edge, but not quite in the Cotswolds. So we're in a nice sort of picturesque area of the country. So we've got 3 schools within the academy. So within that, we've got like Henry Box, so that's a fairly major sort of big sort of secondary in the actual town. So we've got about 1,100 students in the school. I know there's other larger schools out there, but it feels big to us. And then we've got a couple of primaries attached to the academy. So we've got one of our feeder primaries in the town is attached to us. They've got about 200 students. And then we've got a smaller rural school. They've only got about 36 students, that they're part of the group. And we like to think we're a relatively collaborative academy. So we kind of try to get on and do what's best for everyone, try and work as a team, really. So, you know, I'm looking after sort of IT, but I'm also looking at, you know, the estates team and admin and, you know, what toilets are blocked today and all those exciting things that sort of make up my life. And, you know, that involves, we look after about 150 staff within the academy. So, yeah, we're kind of, you know, relatively close-knit community. We use Microsoft Server. So the primary is a little bit ahead of the secondary here, that they're purely in Microsoft 365 using Entra ID. So they're very cloud-based, Intune managed devices. Henry Box is kind of not behind, but it's a slightly different approach here. So we've got Microsoft Active Directory that then ties in with Federation into Office 365. So that's kind of where we are, really. We've been doing a little bit of a journey in the last few years, that we've taken quite a few of our core services that were sat in the server room and they're now out in the cloud. So we're on a bit of a cloud-based journey, and ultimately we will pretty much be purely Microsoft 365 Entra, with just almost gateway services sat in the school within the academy, really. So that's kind of where we are, who we are, where we are.
Thanks, David. I was going to ask you, so how do you see the role of IT in the Mill Academy?
So I suppose it's when I think back. So I've been in the Henry Box for like 30 years, which, you know, longer than 30 years, which is a really long time. And I kind of look back at but, you know, how IT has changed, really. So it's gone from the little BBC, you know, basics micro sat in the corner of the classroom that you used as a treat once in a while. And, you know, it was kind of, wow, we're using a computer, to actually, it's kind of almost gone completely the opposite. So it's almost just a core tool these days. It's kind of like, you drill in a hole and you go and get your cordless drill out of the cupboard. It's kind of fundamentally a tool to achieve a job, but it's such an important tool. You kind of think about, if you walked in one morning and none of your IT was sat there, what would you do? And some people might celebrate, but actually, on the whole, the school will grind to a halt. It's bad enough when a photocopy is not working, let alone when the rest of the IT systems aren't working. So it's really that core essential tool that makes the school work. It is everything, a lot of stuff. How can you cope in a day without IT? And I think it would be a really tough challenge that if you didn't have IT there. So it's a core business service.
Can I ask you, so how do you go about planning? How do you go about planning your IT delivery?
So
and how far ahead do you plan?
So within the academy, we have an ICT strategic group. So myself sits on there, the network manager would be on that group. And then go back a few years, we kind of weren't ignoring the primaries, but they weren't having a big say in the group, because fundamentally the way secondaries work is quite different. It's a very different role to how primaries are. You walk into a primary school and it's very different to a secondary. So we kind of wanted to include that. So the ICT strategic group is our core. So we have input into that from the IT staff, from myself, from the finance sort of side of things, and then from the heads. So the CEO, the heads of the schools. And that's kind of there because IT can kind of make that, well, this is a great bit of kit. This is what we can put out into classrooms. This is what we can give the staff to use for IT. But if you don't have that fundamental link between IT and what are you delivering and what the teachers need, you've got to have it's kind of got to be holistic. You've got to see the whole picture, because if you don't have that whole picture, you're setting yourself up for failure, because fundamentally, whatever you do, what you deliver has got to meet the needs of the teachers. And more importantly, it's got to enable the academy to deliver good lessons for the students. So, that's the what do we need? So that's the curriculum input. So what do you need to deliver your lessons? And then you get into the kind of the core. What do you need in a classroom? So is that a good, good LFD? What equipment do the teachers work? And so you can't have anyone just dictating what you're going to do. You've got to have a collaborative approach just to ensure that things are going to work and you're achieving that equity for the students, and everyone's getting a fair chunk of the, the bite. So 5-year plan is our target, but IT is quite quickly moving, and so we have a 5-year plan, but actually technology comes along. You go back 5 years and think, how much was AI on the scene? And it was kind of there, but not like it is now. So you kind of we adapt, so effectively it's a 5-year plan, but it tends to get, it's almost a rolling 5-year plan. So we're kind of looking at our current plan, but equally we're adapting it to think, where is the technology now? What are we needing to change to deliver the goal over that rolling sort of period? So that's kind of how we do the IT planning, really. Sort of largely ICT strategic.
I think that covers that well. And I was going to ask you, what would you say are the key areas of your IT landscape that need protection from cyber threats?
So I suppose basically anything you can sit down and use as a piece of IT equipment. So that is, at the core level, it's the core servers, it's the Active Directory, but it's more than that, because it's endpoints. So we kind of, we have endpoint solutions in place to guard the technology, but then it's the what are other people going to bring in and try and plug into the network? So how can we monitor that? So it's kind of basically anything that's kind of IT kind of fits within what you're trying to protect or control, and part of that might be that if you've got CCTV, is it segregated and is it away from your, the rest of your curriculum network equipment? It's kind of that, how do you, and this is where WatchGuard is quite good, that in sense of how you can kind of set things off and have rules on WatchGuard to stop VLAN A getting to VLAN B and so on. So it's kind of anything IT, I think, is probably the answer to that, really. So servers, endpoints, switches, your wireless access points, BYOD, do you have a BYOD system? Are they being protected, from a not getting to dodgy stuff, but actually stopping them getting to anything that you need to protect? So I kind of think of cybersecurity really as kind of a bit like Plants versus Zombies, in the sense that you've got, and that sounds a little bit odd, but I kind of think, so, that's a tower defense game. So it's kind of defense in depth, defense in layers. So you don't want single layers. You kind of want to have a layered approach for your security, or at least in my mind you do. So that's kind of how we approach that. But yeah, anything that's attached to the network, I think you have to kind of consider as a threat.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I think I know you've touched on this a little bit, but can I ask you, what actual cybersecurity technologies do you have in place at the Mill Academy?
So our edge device, so our connection to the big bad wide world, is a pair of high availability WatchGuard boxes. So they're providing our first line defense, really. So that's our intrusion protection. So stopping the baddies getting in, if we, as best as you can. But also it's then, so with WatchGuard, but then we add in, as I was referring to earlier, we have like that layered defense. So we go for WatchGuard, we've got Sophos on our endpoints, we use Lightspeed, so we've got Lightspeed filtering and monitoring. So that they're our core products we use on the client devices. So again, layered. So effectively, WatchGuard is kind of our fallback. It's our, it's our final safeguard to stop stuff getting in and out. And there's certainly cases where, I'm not, Lightspeed is a decent product, but in this world, nothing's infallible, so you need your layers. So WatchGuard, Lightspeed, Sophos, they're our primary products we use for our cyber defense.
And you also have Acronis for your, is it for data protection?
Yeah, so in terms of our backup, so obviously, we use, so our servers are backed up with Acronis Cyber Protect. So that provides that's nice, because it's safeguarding our servers. It's given us our immutable backup protection. So we have a mixture of, some of it's in the cloud, some of it's on local NAS boxes. So that's kind of that's a solution we've purchased through OxIT, and going back a few years, we kind of looked at a few alternative products there, and that was the one we sort of settled on, and we've had some decent experience with Acronis there. So that's fundamentally, how we look after the network. We have another product that looks after the Microsoft 365, but equally, at the end of that contract, we can seriously look at potentially using Acronis, because they will do the Microsoft 365 protection as well. So again, Acronis is a nice product because there's lots of modules in there. So we're looking at potentially Acronis for doing our patch management going forward.
Can I ask you, how did you go about choosing the technology and the IT partner?
So I suppose you have to we identify the need, because that's your starter. So some of that is sort of internal, some of it is driven by basically DFE saying you need to be doing this, mate. So identify your need, and then we will research products. So that is, it's IT press, it's looking about what is out there. It's you're Googling, you go ask your chat GPT these days, so you kind of have to have an idea what you need and what can do it, what can do it. So that's your basic research. And then really that then leads us into, well, we've got an idea of what we need to achieve. We've got an idea of what products we can use to do that. Who do we use to deliver that, really? And that's kind of the process we go through. So it's the what's the need, what products are out there, and I kind of try, when I'm selecting products, I try to keep an open mind really on what we'll do. I don't kind of limit myself to a view. I try to get a good overview of each product really, and that involves demos, but equally ideally trying to speak to someone who's got these products in place, because you can be shown all the lovely shiny tin and solutions in the world, but actually sometimes it's not until you actually speak to someone who's using it and they can say, yeah, it looks really nice, mate, but and so it's that it's speaking to other people, and that's your peers, that's other schools, because education, it's very different to the, I don't want to use the phrase real world here, but it's a very different environment to a lot of other businesses in the country.
No, that's fair enough. I was going to say at this point, I know there's been a question in the chat. We will be covering all the questions at the end of David's session, during David's session, and then obviously for Martin's session, we'll cover any questions at the end of that as well. But by all means, please put questions in the chat. We will cover them. So just to move on, can I ask you, what are the benefits you're experiencing from using the technology such as the WatchGuard firewalls?
So I think what you kind of, certainly on the cybersecurity sort of front and on the protection sort of front, you've got to have faith in it that it's actually doing the job. And part of that is knowing that you've got a really good product sat there, but equally part of it is the monitoring it. It's keeping your eye on it. So is it doing the job you think it's doing? So that's your dashboards. So is it picking up intrusion protection? Are things going on? Is it stopping it? And I suppose cybersecurity is a never say never really. So you've kind of got to keep your eyes on it, and that comes from the looking at the reports, just checking it. Is it functionally working? Whether that's your endpoint protection or whether it's your firewall, or is it you're like your KIPSI reports from your filtering. And I think sometimes there is silence is not a good thing. If you're not seeing stuff on reports, then actually that in my mind raises the question, is it doing the job, or is it kind of just not picking up stuff? So I'm not saying we all suddenly want alarms triggering, but fundamentally you've got to keep an eye on these technologies, and is it working for you? So that's kind of the key bit really. And part of that then is tied in with is the support good? If you've got a problem, can you get the great thing I find with Ox IT, and I'll give Chris a bit of a name check here because he's just really good, is that I can pick up the phone and say, Chris, got an issue, this needs sorting, and actually I can stop worrying at that point, because I know, well, Chris will go away and he'll work behind the scenes, and whether it's he's sourcing a product or he's sorting an issue, it just happens. And that's so important for us from a supplier point of view, to know that we've got a trustworthy supplier, that they've got your back. So if we've got an issue, that they'll respond, and not that there are so many firms out there that once they've got their money, they're not interested. So it's important for us that they follow it up, and that named person is there, that you've got someone you can reach out to if you've got an issue. That not necessarily expecting the account manager to be tapping away fixing your issue, but at least they're keeping an overview and they're actually getting the team behind the scenes to do the job.
Fair enough. And it can suck a lot of time out of your day dealing with issues. So it is.
Yeah, life is
Yeah.
too short to be spending, days trying to get a laptop repaired, or just sort out a trivial little licensing issue, or so yeah, just to know someone's got your back and the issue will get sorted is so important.
Yeah. No, fair enough. So I was going to ask you, what advice would you give to a school or a college looking to invest in an IT partner who provides cybersecurity solutions?
I suppose fundamentally, can you trust them? Do they feel trustworthy? Are they reliable? Is there someone there that will be there? And you're kind of a little bit here when I say be there, you're kind of in staff churn, because there's lots of companies out there and you phone them one time and the next time you phone, your account manager's changed. And every time you phone, you've got a different account manager. So, reliability, and if you've got an account manager staying in the firm, to me, that's a good sign that you've got a good firm and they're treating their staff well. And if they're treating the staff well, they're going to serve the customers well, because fundamentally, end of the day, we are a customer to that firm. So that is really important. But equally, you're kind of looking at, do they provide good value? Are they open to what products they will offer you? Because every school, our need will be different to all of the other schools out here. There's similarities there, but every school will have a different need, slightly different systems, slightly different setups that will make one product more suited to another school. So it's that, is the supplier open to what products they offer you? So will they listen to what your needs are and match a product to you? Because that's kind of, that stops you getting landed with a product that isn't ultimately suited to you. So I think and it's that relationship. Can you build a relationship? All those kind of things that just make it a good working relationship, a good professional relationship, and ultimately, I suppose money's important, value is important, but equally, I kind of see the need as that, as my old gran would say, you get what you pays for. And, sometimes a fractional extra cost is actually worth the support you get from a company. So, it's going in with your eyes open, I think, and common sense. Will they work for you? That's really important.
That's great, David. I think that kind of wraps it up nicely. I think that's a great insight into your viewpoint and how you've got how you overcome the challenges that you're facing at the Mill Academy. We have got a question in the chat. Just thought I'd field this one to you. How do you deal with ransomware?
So this is where your continuity plan comes in. It's making sure, have you got your disaster recovery in place? So that is then down. I don't think there's such a thing as a generic disaster recovery plan and business continuity plan, because it's got to match your schools, and that then depends on your systems. So part of it is your contracts with your assured supply and your service levels with whoever happens. For us it's Sims, but equally who it's getting your service level place, and your security is in place on your cloud solutions. But equally, business continuity plan, that's kind of your really key factor, because that's kind of, you go through that process and it makes you think about, well, what happens if, how do we cope with, and some of your continuity plan is if the boilers go bang one fine morning, but equally if the servers are totally encrypted and you come in one morning, what do you do? So it's having those lines of thought. How do you contact? And it's really important, and it sounds really old-fashioned and old school here. You need a paper copy that you can actually go and pick off the shelf, because if it's sat on your OneDrive and then is encrypted, it is not worth a jot to you. So it's kind of, business continuity plan, disaster recovery, and a paper copy of it. That's probably, as important as anything. Once you've got your plan and it's sat there, and check it works. Make sure you do your backup recovery, your test restores, because it's so easy to sit there and think, oh, it's fine. And unfortunately, it won't be until you go to hit restore and suddenly something goes, mate, and then you've obviously got a big issue at that point.
I think it's good that you've actually given that sort of like honesty about how insider tips really of how you do this, because it's the real world, and we're all got lots of post-it notes and all sorts of things lying around the place for those handy things that fill in for when your memory's sort of missed something.
And I think I'd probably just add a little extra there, is that actually you don't want single points of failure on your equipment, but actually you don't want single points of failure on your staff. You do not want it to be that if so-and-so gets flattened by a Stagecoach bus, apologies Stagecoach, not singling you out particularly, but if you get a person who gets taken out by whatever means, and they're the only ones who know how to get the so-and-so product to work, well, then that's an obvious issue that you just really need to avoid. So don't get all your eggs in one basket, I guess.
Fair enough. And I think that wraps it up very nicely, David. I was just going to say to everybody, if there are any other comments or questions that come to you during the rest of this webinar for David, just put them into the Q&A, and we'll sort of like come back and cover those later on if they come in after Martin's session as well. But thank you very much for that, David. That was a really good session.
My pleasure.
Very insightful, and very useful to see how the challenges you're facing at the Mill Academy. So I'm now delighted to introduce our second guest speaker, Martin Lethbridge. And with over 2 decades of experience in the cybersecurity industry, Martin has in-depth understanding of the cyber landscape, industry challenges, and complex networks. Martin joined WatchGuard Technologies in 2010 and works with organizations to utilize best practice network security tools to detect and respond to cyber threats across diverse environments, including the cloud and virtualized networks, the general Internet of Things, and wireless frameworks. Prior to WatchGuard, Martin was senior technical engineer at First Option Technologies for 11 years. Martin, I know David was talking a lot about the importance of getting the right fit of cybersecurity protection from the edge to the core, so that teachers can safely continue to deliver their lessons. How does that resonate with your experience?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, one thing I have to say, David, thank you. You said one thing that a lot of people forget. Make sure your everything is on paper in your fireproof safe or something like that. Don't be a Marks and Spencer's. Be a Co-op. Co-op actually tested their resilience the week before they had the ransomware. Marks and Spencer's didn't know what to do, and it all went ping-pong for them. So thank you, Dave. You definitely got you're bang on the money on that one. So back to where your question was, how we can see. Yeah, we do have to, because the problem is, for many years, our schools have always been very much focused on stopping the kids from getting to the places where they want to go to. The websites, the applications they're using, and stuff like that. And I think over the last few years, there's been this massive switch of the schools realizing, hold on a minute, I'm holding key essential data that people actually want. And I still come across some schools that still sit there very shocked that a ransomware or a hacker would find their data very interesting to actually go after. And this is what we have to try and make them realize, that you have one thing that the hackers want. You have data that hasn't turned 18 yet, and is more valuable that it hasn't turned 18, because they can sell it on the dark web for a higher value. And as soon as they turn 18, they instantly are seen as fresh identities on that side. And which just, I mean, over the last 5 years, I think I've seen the use of schools being actively being penetrated and trying to get that sort of data out go up exponentially. And that's not just in the UK. We're seeing that in America and other countries as well. The good news is for us in the UK, I would say the schools that I deal with are very switched on. They are very aware that they need to have this type of protection. They are, maybe in some areas could actually do with a bit of improvement, but it's like anything. Nothing is perfect. Always reassess what you have. And that's exactly what David was talking about. You have to look at the things that you're buying, the things that you're getting, and making sure you're getting is doing what it's saying it's doing. Just because you bought a nice shiny firewall and stuff like that and you got it put in, you don't just sit there and walk away and go, yeah, it's done. You've got to look at the logs. You've got to look at the reports to see what is actually going on. Because I used to do when I do presentations for partners and stuff like that, and I'll always ask, do I have any school administrators in the room? And that you see the one or two put their hands up, and then I'll say, is there any corporate business administrators here? And they'll put their hand up, and I said, right, you corporate businesses, you've got it so easy. You want to give your thanks to the schools administrators because their job is way, way harder, because they've got to not only deal with people attacking them coming from the outside like your corporate businesses do, but you don't find Jan in accounts trying to hack and bypass the school systems or trying to access things they're not meant to. So you're constantly being bombarded from all directions, and you're also a limited amount of stuff. So this is why I would say that the schools I give a lot of respect for, because I've seen some of the stuff the kids get up to, and it's most interesting on that one.
So is there anything that you wanted to sort of specifically touch upon, Martin, in terms of like the core, the edge to the core for the technology, or any anecdotal?
Yes, anecdotal. Or, well, I mean, it's that famous thing of going around from schools to different sites and finding out what the pains that different schools have. I mean, I had one not on the core, but it's definitely an interesting story because a lot of people don't think about it. I went into this school and I knew the sysadmin, and he was saying to me, Martin, I seem to have a bit of an issue that the kids are getting to websites they shouldn't be getting to, and they seem to be bypassing all the systems, and I have no idea how they're doing this. Now, at the time, they didn't have a WatchGuard firewall, but it was just because I knew the guy through where he had previously worked and had just started working there. So as we're walking around, we're sort of sitting there going, well, I can't see how they're actually doing it. And then I remembered in my car, I had one of my access points, and I'm renowned for doing a bit of what we call Wi-Fi ethical hacking. So I have these things called pineapples and stuff like that, which allows me to mimic Wi-Fi and stuff like that. So I started scanning the network. And I went, how many SSIDs do you have on this network? He said, well, only two. One is for the staff and one is for guests and stuff like that. I went, you've definitely got something else going on here. And I could see that there was a hidden SSID on the network. In fact, there was lots of hidden SSIDs. And so I started to track it where it was. And behind one of the cupboards was a BT Home Hub, which I was like, that's interesting. Went round, found another one and another one. In total, we found 16 BT Home Hubs that have been plugged into the school network. And the kids had actually, obviously, the parents had upgraded their broadband and got hold of the home hubs and actually set up their own invisible network and plugged into the Ethernet port, which gave them full access because they hadn't actually locked down the switches on the VLANs. So the kids had worked out if they plugged directly into the ports, they got bypassed all the security that the school had put on there, and they just basically had their own home hub. So, I mean, you just sit there going, ingenious. I just loved that the kids actually circumvented the whole system by just doing something very simple of, oh, mum and dad aren't using that, I'll recycle it at school. Thank you very much. So that just shows the level of ingenious, the level that these kids will go to. I mean, you are all aware of, how the kids will start using things like in Chrome, will use side loading apps to bring up their own VPNs and stuff like that. So the whole point on that one is, yes, you do need to have a good firewall that can actually do that application control, because gone are the days of where we're just looking at websites that the kids are going to. I mean, I think one of the best ones was there was a website. It was I think it was 1942.org that the kids were going to, and they got a little bit suspicious when they went there. It was a proxy avoidance page. It wasn't anything to do with the war or anything like that. But just because it said 1942 or something like that, people just presumed it was something to do with some form of war or something like that. But when we went into it, it was proxy avoidance. But the problem now is that the kids are taking it to this next level of actually downloading side applications into things like Chrome. I think I have come across a lot of schools which will try and block Chrome being used because of that functionality on there. But that's one of the good things with having a firewall that gives you that extra layer 7. We can see that type of applications because we see the first 6 packets going through. We can identify what they're actually doing, and we can control it. And that's what it's all about. I mean, I, as you can probably guess, I have a WatchGuard firewall. My son is now of an age that I don't have to do as much as I used to. But when he was younger, I had everything turned on. I had all the deep packet inspection turned on. I had all the application. Why? Because it wasn't a case that I wanted to be a mean father. It was more the case of, it was what I learned from him and the things that he got up to at school meant I was more able to talk to my customers and say, I've seen my child doing this or doing that. So, and I think that's where it pays dividends.
It's always fascinating talking to someone like you, Martin, because you are abreast of all the latest, basically threat types that are out there, including obviously the trends in the playground. Is there any sort of like update on threat types that we should be aware of that sort of spring to mind for you that are quite pertinent for schools, besides the students themselves?
The students themselves. The students are always definitely a good topic. There's always loads of things that they get up to on that one. I mean, we talk about, ransomware. Are we seeing a rise in ransomware? Actually, we're starting to see it declining slightly, which is unusual. And the reason for that is because people have got better backups now. So, David's using Acronis backups, and these backups are actually to have ways of making sure that they aren't, copying one another. You can test them and stuff like that. So although don't think you're going to sit there going, oh, ransomware is going down, I don't need to worry about the endpoint. You still need the endpoint. I'm going to tell you that now massively, because they're may not be using the ransomware so much, but they're definitely getting inside the networks a lot easier. And this is where one thing I would always say to any school. Now, obviously, if you're a school, you should be doing things like deep packet inspection of all HTTPS traffic. We all know that we have to do it. If you're not doing it, then you're missing about 90% of any type of traffic going through, because everything is HTTPS. You only have to go to the BBC webpage and it's encrypted, which is like really daft. Encrypting my news? Why? But this is the way the world's gone. So my advice to any school or any business is you have to do the deep packet inspection, because you've got to have better visibility. If you've got better visibility, you can see what's going on that side of things. Don't ever take for granted that things are running swimmingly. Check them. You have to look for what's normal on your network, because the problem we have nowadays is that you will not spot something going on if you don't understand how your network normally behaves. I mean, many years ago when I worked at First Options, I was subcontracted out to the EMEA. 2 days a week, I would sit there and monitor 5 firewalls. And my job was very boring. I actually looked at logs. Can I just say, life is not worth living, but the lunches were good. But nowadays, with the way that these firewalls can present themselves, they're able to see things in a graphical sense. And if you know at 9 o'clock on a Monday, your spike of traffic is going to go exponentially because everyone's logging in on that side of things, and then it drops down. But if you see that spike carrying on, then something else is going on. And if something else is going on, then you may need to actually go, okay, we need to dive into this. We need to understand. If we normally see, we always see something like 30 gigs of data going through at this time of day. And also you start seeing 45, 50, 60 gigs of data. Why is that gone up? Is it all of a sudden someone trying to, trickle stuff out the normal traffic side of things? And then that means that you've got something to actually start looking at and actually digging into on that. Because this is what some of the not the ransomware, but what the hackers are doing is they're getting inside the network and then they're starting to exfiltrate the information. And once they've got the information out, that's when they do the killer bit. Whether they do the ransomware or they just let you know that they've got your data. I mean, I had wasn't a school, but it was based in Ireland. I cover Ireland as well. This company basically kept getting phone calls from people saying that they had their data and that if they didn't pay it, they're going to release it onto the dark web. So the receptionist was getting these phone calls and just kept hanging up on them, thinking that they're all crank calls. And eventually started getting phone calls from from the police going, "We believe that your information is on the dark web. We need," and she was like, "Yeah, crank call." So they sent the guard around because it's the Irish police. They went knocking on the door, and she says, "Well, I keep getting these calls," and I think, "No, it's real, madam. We actually have seen your data is on the internet, on the dark web, and we've been trying to get in contact with you." Now, here's something that you may have to realize. Educate your staff to understand what's real. Take it seriously. And I think the best thing you can always do is educate your staff with like phishing protection. We all do phishing testing with our, you give them a bit of training. You've done it at the beginning of the year because it was part of the sit down with IT and they'll tell you the scary stuff and they do that sort of thing. But test them. I get tested monthly. I'm going to tell you, it's not nice if I click on a phishing link because I'm named and shamed with the other SEs or who got that and they get a wooden spoon. It's not nice. But I've got to be truthful. The days of the phishing now is so different. They read really well. The spelling is good. Probably there's no point telling me that one because I'm dyslexic, so I read things in a completely different way. But I'm going to tell you now, they are looking so good. So train your staff to be suspicious of anything. That's a good thing. I don't want to go, "Oh, if I train them up, all I'm going to do is get lots of emails from my staff going, is this phishing? Is this phishing?" You know what? I'd rather a staff member sending me an email, "I think this is phishing," than a staff member just clicking on it and then next thing is game over for me. But this is also where the good things come in because like with the WatchGuard firewall, we've got the DNS watch where we can do DNS level protection. So if a user clicks on a phishing link, we actually stop them from going to that site and then we give them a bit of phishing training there and then. So that's a good thing. But it's all about, train your staff because they're the most important things. Other things, train your staff on how to use passwords. In fact, no one should actually remember their passwords. I have 3 passwords. One to log onto my computer, one to actually log into my password vault, and one to log onto my Wi-Fi because the kids keep forgetting what the Wi-Fi password is. That is it. I don't want to know any other passwords. I think a good one thing, it's a life skill now. It's no longer the days of passwords were something that we can remember. It shouldn't. Passwords should be 16 characters long, uppercase, lowercase, special character. Thank you very much. I don't want to know it. I mean, admittedly, if I lost my password vault and lost my password in that sense, I do follow Dave's advice. I do have a paper copy of all my passwords. I go every 6 months, I sit there and I print it off and I put it in a secure location. So even if my computer goes boom, I have a backup. So that's why I love David's comment of make sure you got a backup in as a paper copy. So it's putting that investment into your staff to actually make you more secure pays more dividends further down the line on that side. That's for sure.
I think it's always amazing the lengths people will go to. When I read up on the latest stories about phishing and social engineering, some of the examples that you hear are quite incredible. The lengths that people will go to get through.
But it's not just the lengths. The thing is, what you got to remember, it's a business. You go on the dark web, and I'm not encouraging any of you to go on the dark web. I do. This is what this laptop over here is for. It's on a separate network and all those sorts of things, so I know where and how and control. They have an amazing business of actually going, so you would like to ransomware someone? Yes. Would you like customer service that, someone actually is on the end of the phone or email? And they rate them on how well they're actually doing and how good and it's all designed. They can even make it to be designed for a particular customer. I want this ransomware only for this type of sector or this company to affect them. They're so bespoke, it's phenomenal. And what they are also is they will sell, off their credentials once they've got into other people, into other groups on that side. Now, the good news is that they do seem to have a little bit of honor. I don't know if you heard about the nurseries, the nursery school in London last year, where they captured all the data and then they started releasing the information about the children and their parents and stuff like that on the internet, which is against the rules. And the good news is the hacking community actually took down all that information and also deleted everything and shunned the group that did it. So it shows they do have a little bit of honor. But it does worry me in the same thing of how easy it was for them to get that information in the first place.
Yeah. So you've touched on this already, but if we could summarize, what do you think would be the main priorities if you had like a top 3 sort of priorities for education in 2026? How would you sum it up?
Right, top priorities. I mean, I'm going to park the KCSI side of things because that is stipulated. Every school needs to be following it. But I do say good quality firewall, something that is able to do the layer 7 stuff, able to do the application control, has multiple layers of security. You heard David talking about the layered approach. WatchGuard believes massively in that. In fact, on our firewalls, we don't even use our own endpoint signatures on the firewalls. So we actually use a combination of different vendors like Bitdefender, Cylance and stuff like that to actually give our firewalls better type of security. And then it's also down to the endpoint as well. I mean, David's using Sophos at the moment. Now, David will talk later. We'll get you onto the WatchGuard one at some point. But the whole point is having it joined up is probably the most important thing, because nowadays, in the world that I live in, cybersecurity is all about joining up your security so they can talk to each other. Because before, many years ago, it's always a case of we'd have modular things doing everything on that. But then when it's modular, none of it talks to each other, none of it knows about each other. Nowadays, the way that most modern cybersecurity works is if we see something bad going on the endpoint, we can tell the firewall can block the ports, can also then isolate the machine off. It has the full capabilities to do everything all at once. And then with like XDR, where we can actually see, the telemetry from that, we can tell the Wi-Fi and then, authentication. And then finally, on top of that, the third most important thing, I think I'm starting to see a move now for MFA for all. Traditionally, it used to be MFA, multi-factor authentication, was only for the teachers. I'm now starting to see if they have any credentials on the cloud, they need to have some form of MFA. So it's sort of like MFA for all is definitely golden. And it's quite easy nowadays because, like for us, we have an app and the app allows you to use it not only just for your Office 365, you can use it for your PayPal, your Facebook, for your personal things. So the whole point there is, making sure that, you're actually giving better security at the beginning of their lives, because it gives them a better understanding going throughout. So actually teaching the kids about proper cybersecurity. I'm sure they do at the school. Although my son, when he came home from school, he used to say, "Dad, can't you run our ICT courses because you're far more interesting than the teacher that I have." Which was like, well, I can't help that bit, son. I'm too mischievous for my own good.
That's great. That's a fantastic sort of summary, Martin. So a useful session again, some great insights provided into the challenges in the education sector and how to overcome them. I think particularly the need to stay vigilant and ahead of the curve in terms of threat types, making sure you have the right tech in place to counter these. I know that we've got some questions that have come through. They've come through for David. I'm just going to go through some of these, David, with you now, and just let's read them out. So I know that some of these have been dealt with, but I thought this one, the first one is, what is your process, though, if you have issues on your server? I think this was about the backup side of the session. Would you roll back your servers from backup or wait for intervention? And if you wait, how would you be handling the next stage? And I think this is to do with an issue with uncontrolled infection, ransomware, etc.
So I think because because I was sort of seeing it as sort of like a dead server sort of approach. So I think fundamentally we'd almost isolate it would be our starter point, just so that it's not going to spread. And then I think you need to kind of almost have take a view so that you don't really want to do anything in a panicky sort of situation. So I think that's, you can isolate the server, talk to your support providers, and then follow a process that actually will get you back up. So, logically, I think, we probably would end up doing a rollback if, but equally, the question there is you kind of got to know what you're dealing with, because if it's something that's got into your firmware and you're rolling back and it's sat in the firmware, you're potentially just going to end up back to an infected server again. So I think you need to kind of talk to your support providers, know what you're dealing with.
And I think that's a specific question that we can take. I suggest we take your details for that one, and then one of the account managers will reach out and provide you with some information on this. And I hope that will help answer that question for you. It's quite a specific one.
Can I say one thing on that one?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Stay calm. Don't panic. That's, if anything, unplug cables, i.e. network cables, get it off the network straight away. That's one thing I always got taught as a junior. If something goes wrong, cut the cable, don't matter. Whatever you got to do, just get it off the network. But stay calm. Too many people, as soon as they see something like that, go into meltdown. That is the worst way to actually handle that type of issue.
That's good. That's a good bit of advice there. It's the sort of the human side of things as well. So we've got some more questions here that have come through. I'm just going to go back a little bit in time here. So we've got this is for David actually. So what are your priorities for 2026? What are your key challenges, David?
So we're reviewing our cybersecurity. We're wanting to catch up with our cyber essentials. And I'm talking to Chris about that. So I'm sure he's going to do us a really good deal and give us some assistance on that. So that's got my plug in there. But equally, we're also on to practical sort of things here. So we've spent a fair chunk of money on a fire alarm system in the last few years, so we kind of got a bit of catching up to do with our IT investment. So we're addressing getting the remaining projectors out of the classrooms, all those kind of sort of just improving the environment for the teachers to be able to deliver lessons to the students. So, redoing classrooms with large format displays. We've got our Sophos contract is coming up for renewal at that point. So if Martin's doing us a really good deal, we can get to the point where we're going to get our WatchGuard endpoint, so it all ties in with the firewall, and then we're sort of continuing our move. So effectively, we're trying to lighten our core of our network. So we're coming up for server refreshes and switch refreshes in the core, but we're wanting to get to a point where we've got a lighter weight core. So effectively, we're more Microsoft 365 Entra, so that and Intune managed devices. So that's kind of our direction of travel at the moment.
That's great, David. Thanks for that, and I hope that's answered that question for you. I've got another question here, I think for you, Martin. It was during your session, and I think I could ask this to both of you, but should schools do the Cyber Essentials certification?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a massive yes. Actually, I think Cyber Essentials should go. Cyber Essentials Plus should be across the board for everyone. It has I deal with a lot of obviously other countries and stuff like that, and I think having these sort of governmental sort of like stipulations coming in has really helped us to make people aware of the issues that are out there. I mean, for my days, I remember when I first started back in 2010, talking to a customer or of any ilk and saying, "We'd like to say you're a firewall," and they say, "I have a Draytech router." Surely that's a firewall. Has now made it so much easier with their whole Cyber Essentials because they've learned that a JTech router is not a firewall, and they need to actually have something of proper ilk. The only reason I'm not so keen on the Cyber Essentials bit is because it's that tick box of, yeah, I've got that, yeah, I've got that. And I've gone to many places where they said, I have Cyber Essentials, turned on my laptop and downloaded the iCar virus without any challenge whatsoever. And I go, you sure? You're not doing deep packet inspection, mate. They go, oh, well, yeah, we turned that off because it was being painful. No, that's what security is all about. You have to have a little bit of pain to get the gain, I'm afraid.
And I think use it. So, I think at the moment they're changing the Cyber Essentials. So effectively to get it, you're going to have two-factor authentication. So, it's how do you deliver that in school? And, you get into, yes, there's phone apps, but then if the government don't want students using phones in lessons, how do you deliver the app? So, you always have like the little fobs. So,
Yeah.
You have that back. That was perfect timing there, Martin. But, for me, I see that as actually... okay, it's a requirement to have it and to get it, you need that. But that's a good thing because you can use it to leverage where you need to be.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I totally agree that, yes, I know the phone thing is a big hot topic in all education. But yeah, there is other ways to actually do the authentication, doing the MFA. Sorry, I'm going to say MFA, not 2FA. I'm not a big fan of 2FA because I can bypass 2FA and I have ways of doing it. MFA is a bit harder, but we have. I mean, there's things like passkey now. There's like the YubiKey keys and stuff like that. There's ways that anyone can actually help to have better security, and I think I'm all encouraging of anything that encourages that sort of stuff.
And I'm just going to add to that again, we suggest we sort of take a note of your details, and I can get an account manager just to reach out with some information about Cyber Essentials certification for you. So I hope that answers that question for you. The next question, I think, again, it comes through from, I think it's for you, Martin, actually. What are your thoughts on endpoint protection on Apple devices, iPads, MacBooks, etc.? Is it necessary, or are the built-in systems sufficient? Any recommendations for products?
Look, I'm a big Apple fan, lover. I mean, my personal life is Apple. My work life is Windows on that side of things. So, but then I do have a lot of Apple and I have Android and stuff like that. I have to be agnostic in many ways. But with all that said in mind, I mean, I brought my children up. My daughter is Apple, my son is Windows, so it just shows chalk and cheese on that one. Never quite got them into Linux, it's a shame. But my whole point is, yes, you have to have endpoint on everything nowadays. Why? Because everything can be infected. The days of the Mac where you said, oh, I don't need antivirus because I'm a Mac user, has gone on that side. Now, obviously with iPhones and tablets, I'd say if they're managed by the school, yes, stick it on there because there's multiple things that you get extra with it. You get things like the ability to track where the device is. You have the ability to, even do URL filtering with it as well, because it gives you a lot of capabilities on that side of things. Because obviously, the Apple's devices, you can't sign in as a user, but at least then you can actually get the information on that side. So I do believe that everything should have endpoint on it because we only got to think back of now, if any of you are old enough like me, and remember the NIMDA virus, the very first virus that ever made it to the 1 o'clock news, that is still going round. It's on something like 14th or 15th millionth variant on that side, which is a shock to me because I do remember when it came out, but it's still going round. And it just shows that these things are out there. So as far as do I have any recommendations? I'm afraid I do work for a company called WatchGuard, and I'm going to say my WatchGuard endpoint is very good. But you're going to say he's likely to say that. Well, I'm also going to say something else. All my family has it, not because I get a free license, it's because I actually believe in it that much. I've been doing WatchGuard longer than I've worked for the company. In fact, my very first firewall is that one. I learned how to learn firewalls then, or before I even started at WatchGuard. But when it comes down to endpoint, yeah, I do believe it's very good and it does work. And it is also very low on the overhead on the devices as well. And that's key because if you think about it, the schools nowadays, RAM is going up through the roof. We need to be using stuff that is not going to eat all the RAM on our machines. You know, on my machine right now, it's only running at 2 megs because it knows how to protect. I'm not going to ask David how well his Hitman Pro is doing on the Sophos. I'm sure it's going to be a lot more than 2 megs, but there you go.
That's great, Martin. Thanks very much for that. And again, I'd just say that we'll take your details and send out some information to you about the endpoint protection for Apple devices to cover that one for you. Hope that answers your question. Next question. I know we're running over a little bit here, but we're just going to wrap up. There's a couple more questions and then we can wrap it up today. And this one is any recommendations? I think it's for Martin. Any recommendations for navigating MFA for students following new mobile phone guidance, as well as students who don't have mobile phones, e.g. key stage 1 and 2?
Okay. So I think we sort of covered it earlier, but it's very simple. There is other ways. I mean, for us with WatchGuard, we support, yes, by using that on a phone and stuff like that. But there is a thing called the dongles, these lovely things. And they can be as generic as something like this, or they can be like this with the WatchGuard. But there's also things like YubiKeys, which supports passkey entrance on that side of things. So there is different methodologies that we can use. Obviously, the only downside is anything like this, the kids will lose it, which is a pain in the bum. But here's the thing, we've got to give better security. So the other thing is, well, we use these things, the phones, but then the government's going, no phones in schools, it's bad. So we have to then think of which are the other ways. So I'm not a big fan of YubiKeys in the sense of because the kids will plug it in and walk away and leave in the machines, and that means then you have to then enable USB devices on the machines, which, as we all know, is normally tucked away and a pain to get to. So I actually prefer these sort of things, and you can get these for relatively, I mean, anything from £30 and up, and buying in bulk gets more. But they will link in with our all-point systems, you know. So I do recommend that sort of taking that approach. That's really going to be your only approaches, unless we start putting chips in their fingers, and then that way they won't lose. But I think the parents might have something to say about that.
You see the branding on the fingers now, on the fingernails.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that, Martin. We've got one more question, and it's a sort of more general question. I think it's for Martin as well. So, what qualifications in cybersecurity do you think best prepare and equip you for the real world?
Oh, wow. See, I started back in 1998, where having best credentials was I liked playing with computers and I wanted to learn a lot more. Nowadays, it's one of these things, I get asked this question constantly, especially at events like InfoSec or BETS or stuff like that. I'll get a young person coming up to me and go, I want to be like you. And I go, that's nice. But what are you actually doing? Yes, you can go and do the computer science side of things, which I think is great. But my thing is actually real world experience. Work in a support environment. Get in a company where you can actually learn the basics. You know, one of my friends, their son actually was at Portsmouth University, worked in the IT department just to sort of like repairing computers between just to get a bit of money and stuff like that. He's just finished his university. He's now staying there and is working his way through because he actually loved it that much more. And the thing is, I think real world experience means that you understand what's going on. I had the fortune of actually hiring some new people a couple of years ago, and the CVs was, yes, you have great, references, not references, it was certificates and stuff like that. But when we came down to actually doing my 40 questions to see how well they did, they were poor. And that was the worst bit, is that they hadn't actually practiced what they preached. They sort of knew the bits, but at the end of the day, you've got to understand the real world environment. And I think that's something I would say. So for me, I would always say, good thing is if you can get in with a partner or something like that, like OxIT, and then, you know, they can do maybe some graduates. I've got many partners across the country that actually bring graduates in or school children in, and they'll train them up in those support environments, and that gives them that capabilities to grow into the world, because we need more cyber people. We have a big shortage in the UK. It's not just the UK, it's worldwide, but we are constantly needing more people on that side. The really brainy people and the people like me that like to sit there talking about it. So it's a very interesting world, that's for sure.
Certainly, it's not going anywhere soon, is it?
Well, I hope not. I want to be able to retire. No, I'm really joking.
So just a quick glance at the Q&A. I've got a couple more questions of just snuck on. I'm just going to run them past you again, Martin. I think they're for you. What should Google Workspace organizations that use Chrome OS look out for? How can we stay safe?
Oh, Chrome OS is a hard one, because Chrome OS is quite heavily locked down and stuff like that. But I mean, the thing I would always say to people is, look, as long as you are using good technologies out there, there is you know, people that have I mean, we have our DNS filtering that we can actually put on there that actually stops the kids from going to sites and stuff like that. But then there's also things, you know, I've heard of companies like Senso and those other companies that are out there that can actually do the screenshots and so forth. I think it's like any common sense. Anything that touches the internet, what we need to make sure is that they are locked down, they are protected, there's logs, and they have ability to see what they're up to. Because, you know, you're dealing with kids. This is something that they constantly, is that constant on our mind of, can we prove that we can see everything? And I know Chrome OS is the cheap way to go and stuff like that. But can you do everything that you want to do, that you need to do to perform your, you know, the KCSI reports and stuff like that? If you can't, then maybe the cheap isn't good. Maybe it's going that look, you know, on that side. So I mean, I'm torn with Chrome OS. I like it, but I also hate it as well.
Fair enough. That's I hope that answers that question as well. And finally, we've got it's kind of like a statement and question as well, which is you cannot pass Cyber Essentials without MFA for all users, and some primary and preschools cannot enforce this? Question mark. So again, Martin, I don't know if that's
so. Okay, here's the thing. Cyber Essentials, yes, you can't pass without MFA, but the MFA is on any cloud account. If the kids are using anything to do with the cloud, then MFA is required. But if the kids or whatever aren't touching any of the cloud, anything to do with the cloud, or have cloud accounts, then they don't need MFA on that side. So this is where my knowledge of obviously how schools work, and David I may have to refer to someone else, but I would say, look, for the primary schools, let's be realistic. I don't know, the kids of that age, are they actually touching the cloud? Yes. Did they have any form of data on there? Maybe we have to sort of be more logical on what we're actually doing with this on that side. Because I think it's like anything, when I read the KCSI reports and stuff like that, I do sometimes wonder who writes them, especially what I see coming down the line with, you know, must be able to do certain things. You go, on a month of Sundays, no one's going to be able to do that. So we have to be realistic with all our objectives with these things. But don't dismiss stuff. If you can do it, then do it. If you can't, you know.
That's good advice. That is good advice. I think that sort of covers everything off from the Q&A point of view today. So thank you to everyone who contributed to that for all your questions, and I hope we answered these for you. I'm just going to just share something with you. It's just to do with the CPD side of the call here. Basically, this session does count as 1 hour of CPD towards your personal development goals. So when we send you the recording, you'll also receive a copy of your personalized certificate. And I was just going to add, unless there's any other questions coming into the Q&A, that does conclude our webinar session today. And we'd like you to sort of thank you for taking the time to come along and listen. Yeah, so sort of give you back some time to your day and enjoy the rest of your day. And we hope you found this a useful experience. As I stated earlier, you'll get a copy of this recording emailed out to you the next day or so. And all that remains for me to do is to thank our speakers today. And also a special thanks to everyone for coming. So thank you very much, and goodbye to everyone.